Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings postcast, the greatest comeback of all time. Welcome in, everybody. I'm going to be talking a bunch to the chat in this one. No Sam Ekstrom today. He had another show to go to, which, you would expect by 4:20 p.m. Central, you'd be done with this. So please, everybody in the chat, everybody live, ask me questions. That's how we're going to do this because there's too much to talk about in this game to fit it in a quick postcast. Also, Locked On Vikings will be up on Monday. We'll talk about a lot more of this stuff. But please come ask me questions. But first, let's just go over the broad strokes here. Vikings go down 33-0 at halftime. Nobody has ever come back from a 33-0 halftime deficit. There's been a couple of 30-0. It was one win and one tie. And in the waning seconds of overtime, after a 36-3 second half run, the Vikings actually go down and manage to kick a 40-yard Greg Joseph field goal to walk it off. 11-3, NFC North champs. We did it. I don't know what to do. If you were at the game and you happen to be listening to this, or if you're listening to this later, you can find this, by the way, on demand at the Locked On Vikings, Locked On Minnesota Sports YouTube page. You can, of course, find this whole thing brought to you by Bet Online as well, and you will be able to find this on the Locked On Vikings audio feed as well. If you ever miss one of these, you can always catch them here. First thing, okay, Tristy P. This is my headline. KJ Osborne is him. Oh my God, what a KJ Osborne day. It felt like for the whole first half, and I was screaming about it on Twitter. You can go look at my old tweets. They were soft in that half. They looked like they were asleep, like there was no fight. Running backs were fighting for 2, 3, 4, 5 extra yards on running plays. Wide receivers were fighting for extra yardage. They weren't making tackles. They weren't pushing. And on the other side of the ball, they weren't fighting for their own yardage. It just felt like the Colts came out knowing that their backs were against the wall, and the Vikings kind of sleepwalked through it. It looked like the same thing as the Detroit game. And then KJ Osborne had a couple of plays where he truly fought, including that big seam up the middle that almost scored. And then I believe he was the first one to score. So he gets in, and we were like, okay, so it's not the shutout, right? And even at like 33-26, I was going, okay, that's a more normal feeling score. So at least, it won't look too weird in the box score, right? But they actually came back and did it. Kind of feels like only the Colts could let this happen. I don't want to rag on the Colts too bad. I rag on them enough on Locked On NFL. But it kind of felt like only the Jeff Saturday team would be. I mean, they went 3 and out like 4 or 5 drives in a row trying to put the game away. It's something that I honestly could see the Vikings doing. Josh Karen says he wanted the contact. He did want the contact. That was very cool. And I think KJ Osborne is the one who sparked this. Everybody else kind of seemed like they were sleepwalking. Nomad Gaming says, why can't we blitz more? I agree. They blitzed a lot, and you didn't notice because their blitzes got countered super hard. So there were a couple that were just like super quick things. They can't cover to blitz. If you're going to blitz, you have to be able to cover for the 2.5 seconds it gets for the blitz to get home, which is not that much to ask, but the coverage has been so bad that the blitzing just hasn't worked. And when they do blitz, it doesn't even look like they blitz. Nick Schultz, did the Colts not adjust, or did the Vikings do something offensively that stumped them? Here's what I think we're going to see on the tape. And it's really hard. This is the moments immediately after the game, right? But here's what I think. I think the Vikings had a tougher time in the first half with unsustainable stuff. There was a punt block touchdown, a pick six, a stupid fumble luck stuff. There were the 2 fumble scoop and scores that weren't because they blew the play dead. All that stuff is okay, well, that's not going to keep up. And eventually the Vikings managed to settle down, stop making those catastrophic mistakes. I say unsustainable. That doesn't mean that it wasn't their fault, right? There were mistakes there. That pick six was a bad play. The other pick, I think both of them were on Rager, if I'm going to guess right now. Those were bad plays, right? But they're not going to continue. And you got to go in and say, okay, no more of that stuff. Just play your game. We're better than these guys. And that's what I think we saw. I think we saw as soon as the weird stuff, special teams gas and stuff dried up, the better team was clear. And that's why you can't go 36-3 on a team in the second half without that stuff, because the Vikings didn't get that stuff. I mean, they could have had that stuff, but it was taken away by the refs, right? If you have that, or if you don't have that and you go 36-3, you were better than them. You go 33-0 in the first half, but a bunch of it's on fluky stuff, you had a fluky half. So I think they had a fluky half and then they had a better half. That's the way that I'm seeing this game right now. But obviously the tape will show off. I'm sorry, my audio may be wrong. It is.
Thank you very much, Gizenkid. Thanks, buddy. Did Donatel finally figure out something as the dark clouds rolled in, says Bobby Bachet? Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. I don't know if the defense had that bad a game, and I just calm down. I know that sounds completely crazy. But the way this, like, if you look at the box score, right, there was 33 points allowed, or 36 points allowed. 2 touchdowns that were not the defense wasn't even on field for, right? A pick six, a punt block touchdown, right? And then there were 5 field goals. A bunch of those were on short fields after Adder Noir says, where can I get myself a Vikings garden gnome? If you're watching on YouTube, there's a garden gnome behind me that it was kind of a Reddit joke a bunch of years ago. You can find it on Amazon. But yeah, the short fields happened that were like 3-and-out field goals. I mean, these were like stops. And I think if you actually look at the times when the defense like was responsible for making a stop, how much they ceded, I don't know if the Colts did a lot. Like I'll look up the box score real quick, just to get a sense. But did they even like gain that many yards? I don't even know what the total yardage was. 182 for Matt Ryan. Like, yeah, they had over 100 yards, over like 150 yards rushing. So that was a pretty good rushing day. But I think the defense ultimately can feel pretty good about their day because they were put in a really, really rough spot. And then in the comeback situation, they had to get like 6 consecutive stops, and they did. Jeremy McGee says, is there anything to take from KJ Osborne's performance? For me, it's that KJ Osborne fights, right? It's this clutchness he's always had. He's kind of the new Jarius Wright, or Nate Burleson even compared KJ Osborne to himself. And I think that's a pretty good comp. The guy that, hey, you know, when Randy Moss was being doubled and tripled, I can get the ball. Maybe KJ Osborne can be that guy that if you go too hard at Justin Jefferson, he can be the guy. And that might be what we find on the tape with the Colts. Austin Natwick says, see you Vikings in the playoffs. You dang right. That's a clinch of the division, clinch of the playoffs, and a clinch of no worse than the 3rd seed. They now cannot be overtaken by anybody in the NFC South. So it's really just 2nd or 3rd seed with San Francisco, or I think there's still scenarios where the Eagles could like fall apart and they get the 1st seed, but that's pretty unlikely. Hey, this is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline brings you all of these postcasts. They've got odds, news, and scores all over the place. BetOnline had this game at Vikings minus 3.5 by the time the kickoff happened, which turned out to be pretty close. The Colts did end up covering most of the lines. You may have been able to get it at Vikings minus 2.5 earlier in the week. But if you want to bet on that stuff, or if you want to do stuff like live betting, these comebacks games are perfect for live betting or player props and all of that stuff. You could have said, well, the Vikings will come back down 33-0. You would have made a ton of money. You can find all of that at betonline.net. Thank you so much for everything Bet Online. Well, I'll take a couple more questions from the chat here, but then I'm going to work on the Locked On Vikings podcast, which you can, of course, find me on. Of course, again, missing Sam Ekstrom today. I really wanted to hear his thoughts. We'll talk on the Minnesota Football Party, which you can also find on the Locked On Minnesota Sports YouTube channel and podcast feed. Josh Karen says Shelley and Boyd played well, in my opinion. Shelley had a couple of great plays and a couple of not great plays. For those guys being CB5 and CB6 on this team, I'm pretty happy with that. A lot of people are asking about injury things. I believe Adder Noir says, do you think we're going to see Darisaw again before the playoffs? I think it was cramp. It was cramps the first time. I'm pretty sure it was more cramps the second time. And they were on play like 100. Like that will happen in a game that goes this far, this long. 18 possessions for the Vikings. 19 if you count end of half kneel down, which I don't. But yeah, Josh Garman says, did anyone see the money line odds down 33-0? I would be curious to see that as well if anybody has it. But the win probability graph is unreal for this game. But yeah, that it was cramps for, I think, Patrick Peterson, cramps for KJ Osborne, cramps for Christian Darisaw. Could be wrong on that stuff though. We'll see. Kevin O'Connell's usually pretty good at giving us updates on all of that. So we'll see kind of what happens there. Goggles said he saw plus 900, i.e. 9-1 odds. Yeah, Bobby Boucher said if the Vikings hadn't started scoring right when they did, would they have made it? I think they did have a couple of failed drives, right? So it wasn't technically like the most. I guess the most extreme version of this is the one where they wait until like middle of the third quarter, and then they score on like each of their last 6 drives to make it happen. But I'm not sure. Jeremy McGee asks a great question. Goals for the final 3 games of the season: install some new stuff, drill the hits. Here's the thing. I think defensively, and I'm really, really curious to see what kind of coverages I see on tape. Obviously, you can't see that stuff on the broadcast. What they did coverage-wise in this game was will be a very interesting thing. If they did it the same way they did it versus Detroit, then I think you stay that course, because what they did versus Detroit failed because they busted the coverages a bunch, but it was very different from what they had been doing all season long that was getting shredded. And you can find patreon.com/Luke Braun NFL. You can find an article coming out soon on Zone Coverage about what that is, and as well as the Wednesday episode of Locked On Vikings. I kind of did a triple thing to explain that point. But they did coverages differently, and it didn't work because they screwed it up a bunch. But I kind of thought, hey, maybe see what happens when they don't bust those coverages and see if it works then, because the old way certainly wasn't, even though they weren't busting coverages. If they did the same thing here, I would be pretty interested in staying that course and working that really hard in the next 3 games. Ross Jackson of Locked On Saints, my cohort on Locked On NFL, come check us out on Tuesdays, says, what should I take back to the Saints about closing a deficit versus blowing a lead? Asking for a friend. Man, never give up. I thought it was a game where they quit. I was about to come on here with Sam and like yell about how much they quit. Like I was ready to like get up on them and be like, gosh, they just came out, they sleepwalked. This culture is wrong. Like I was going to be such a boomer about it. I was getting ready to say some crazy stuff. But instead they don't. Josh Karen says, was Dantzler out or benched? I believe out. But again, Kevin O'Connell will update us all on that. But yeah, it was just like the never quit of it. And I think this Colts went to a pretty soft coverage in like the third, kind of early fourth quarter, and they went prevent a little earlier. For me, prevent is something you only do when the clock is a factor, and I think they overestimated when clock is a factor. But like, yeah, Jeff Saturday, who has no experience in this, yeah, of course. Yeah, Tristy P says KOC halftime speeches must be goated. Absolutely. That is going to be an all-timer. The locker room speech, I can't wait. After every win, the Vikings YouTube page puts up a locker room speech. I cannot wait for that one. That one's going to be hyped. Oh, right. Yeah. Cameron Dantzler had illness all week, so that might have been a fatigue thing as the game went on quite a bit. Look, there's just like too much to talk about. There's the game Danielle Hunter had. Danielle Hunter lived in the backfield in this game. And again, it's like the same thing that we've had all year where he and Zadarius Smith and honestly Harrison Phillips too, living in the backfield, in the opposing backfield. And it's just that the ball is out so quick every time because the coverage is so bad. But that first half, it was the same thing. They were in that same like split field, middle of field, wide open, skinny posts and digs, just killing them down the field. And they switched to something else in the second half. I wonder if they switched to more man coverage, which is what Tom Pelissero said. A really interesting thing. Tom Pelissero said that, yeah, Yahtzee says the Colts had a drive in the third that took under 55 seconds. And I think there were like incomplete passes in there too, which is, you just can't have clock stoppages when you're in that situation. But yeah, oh God, the Ryan Wright punt down to the 1 at the end of regulation to force overtime. That was incredible. That was unbelievable. Ryan Wright, have my children. But anyways, yeah. So the coverage that they flipped to, or that they said they were going to flip to, was more man coverage. They were going to have Patrick Peterson on the boundary side, on the short side of the field, and then basically say, that's where, and then we're going to man cover, and we're going to say, hey, you better try. They're daring people to throw exactly what the Colts did, which was crossing routes over to the other side of the field with Patrick Peterson chasing, and Patrick Peterson, can you make those plays? And he made some and he missed some, but it turned out to be enough. Bobby Boucher says Greg Joseph redemption. Absolutely. Lucas says Kendricks had 4 TFLs today. I thought he and Hicks actually had really, really nice games. Shooting gaps, playing aggressively, and being awesome there. And it's just that the coverage plays they were asked to make in the first half was just too much, and that's why the Colts were able to move the ball so well. But the Colts just ran out of fluky stuff, and that's kind of how it goes. Kika Cat says winners today: Shelley, KJ, and Jefferson. I think you got to put Kirk in there. 4 touchdowns and leading that comeback. I mean, that's a legacy moment for Kirk Cousins. I mean, that's something you take a picture of something of this game. You take your gloves from this game or something, right? And I don't think he wears gloves. Like you take like your towel from this game and you frame it or something like that. Oh, Tristy P says Dalvin. Of course, yes. The screen at the 2-minute warning that he just houses, where you're thinking, oh my God, they made it, before you realize that was actually scoring too fast and it gave the Colts a chance to come back. But the Colts couldn't move the ball, and they couldn't move the ball for the entire second half. 3 points since halftime. Go up 33-0, score just 3 for the rest of halftime and let them come back. Really bad moment for the Colts. Gary Melbrecht says, was there any corrections made on defense that they can help keep for future games? I think that man coverage thing I was just talking about, I would love to keep that for future games. Hey, I love you all. All right. I've 150 people here. I love it so much. Thank you guys so much for watching this postcast. We'll have Sam in next time, hopefully. But come check out the Locked On Vikings podcast. You can find this audio on the Locked On Vikings podcast feed as well. You can find this show after every game on the Locked On Minnesota Sports YouTube channel. Thank you all so much for watching. We will talk to you throughout the week about this insane comeback victory. But for now, celebrate, because the Vikings just notched a division title in the NFC North. Skol, everybody.